Blog Talk Radio.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me on today. This is Cassie Strom, Women Veterans Speak, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to present on some of this month's events for military sexual assault. There's been quite a bit of activity and exciting discussion on various perspectives. And we're just going to be providing a brief update here on some of the more important ones, particularly those on national level, and maybe some legislative aspects, how they are interpreted. I think that we can make some foundational work for what's out there. And we're moving forward into the final decisions that will be made after the recommendations are reviewed by our Secretary, Austin, and hopefully that we will be in a better place for solving some of the challenges for military sexual trauma and helping victims. My name is Cassie Bennett Santos once again, and I am a woman veteran advocate and the founder of the National Alliance of Women Veterans. We are headquartered here in Philadelphia, and we have been very entrenched in work very on military sexual trauma. And we are excited about the evolution of transition in discussion and in language as to how it is being shared amongst our peers. And certainly as we have begun to engage our legislative components, how they're interpreting some of the more challenging military cultural dynamics and interpreting it into legislation for potential laws and various bills that are in the pipeline, with consideration for changing the way military sexual trauma is adjudicated and prosecuted in our military or without our military. And those conversations are very unique, depending on who you talk to. And I'd like to make a couple of distinctions based on the conversations I've been involved. I have about 30 years of conversations as an experienced expert, I believe. I would say that. And my military sexual trauma. I have contributed across many platforms, and I believe, despite being credited with the contributions, I do believe that my contributions are lived experiences that provide a reality to what the challenges may be, both in and outside of the military, making specific distinctions amongst the very nuanced caveats, being military, civilian, veterans, and the other dichotomies exist in the military culture as they transition outside of the culture into our civilian life post-transitioning from military service. One of the things that I'd like to start with, since I'm going to be very brief here, I'm not trying to provide a lot of information to confuse anybody that may have access to my very challenging perspectives. I think they may be opposed by many. Certainly, I do know that they are very learned from various platforms of legislation, and what I know to be factual on the inside of conversations with the Pentagon and other government discussions over the years. So they are layered, and some reality and some may be questionably as well as factual. Certainly, realistic for what needs to be said to influence that type of reform or eradication or to do away with military sexual trauma. So we'd like to welcome you to our show in this discussion. I would like to just start with this month, which we celebrated Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and I'm just pleased that we have been very active across many platforms, beginning with the listening sessions that were orchestrated by our national offices in Washington, D.C. on military issues. And I think that was very important because these listening sessions held throughout the country, which may still be underway, gives the veterans an opportunity to speak, from their lived experience and how they have transitioned to military service. I was in Philadelphia on March 19th. Vision 4 was extremely provocative. There was various discussions as to how their interpretation may differ from civilians as the women veterans and the male veterans who had shared their experiences and were able to make some distinctions in what war eras they had served, what had been some of their transitioning challenges based on the demographics and geographics. I think they were unique to some of the listeners who may not be aware that there's just not a blanketed approach to how we are sharing our experiences or how they are interpreted. So I thought that was very important to note. I would like to begin with a statement here from a Warner. He's a Democrat of Virginia, is among the bills co-sponsoring the Military Justice Improvement and Prevention Act. I think it's just 2 days underway since Senator Gillibrand announced her collaboration with other senators and Congress to pass this bill. The Senator Gillibrand's bill takes significant steps to change how the military prosecutes serious crimes such as rape and provides new tools to help stem the tide of sexual assault within the ranks. While this bill is not a cure-all solution, we must take bold steps to establish justice and accountability for victims of sexual assault, he said in a statement. Should be she said in a statement. Okay. Well, anyways, Senator Warner, a very long-time supporter of women's rights and women's issues. I participated in some of his forums in the Virginia area, and I found him to be extremely authentic in his engaging women veterans. They established a women memorial there a few years ago. I thought that was a very much a reflection of who he is and what his intent is concerning women in the state of Virginia. And it extends beyond that in his role as senator. And just like to continue on with this, Secretary of Defense Lord Austin is conducting his own 90-day review of a similar recommendation from a Pentagon advisory board. These various recommendation platforms are unique. The ones that are led by the legislative bodies, particularly this particular bill, the Military Justice Improvement Act and Military Justice Improvement and Prevention Act, which has several layers, beginning with 2013, 2012, and that time period when Congresswoman Jackie Spears introduced a bill. She's introduced probably 20 bills on sexual assault, and we are moving forward with exposing the issue, but resolving the problem, I think, has another tier, which requires a different analysis. Like to just lay that foundation here in this conversation. Over the past, I'm going to say 10 years or more, there's been a different kind of advocacy on military sexual trauma. And I do know that we're in a different place, but the recommendations that are going to Senator Lord Austin, the Secretary of Defense, where he has disbanded over 60 committees since his appointment, and is very serious about being bullied into any expedited strategies that may omit a careful review of what these recommendations entail. And as a general, of course, I do believe that his assessment will be very involved and assured that all aspects are considered. One of the things that I have been privy to listening in the various forums this week, whether it's the Women's History Month Annual Day that was hosted by the National Alliance of Women Veterans, but it was also moderated by a VA federal officer in Philadelphia. And it was attended by our women veterans of various parts of the country, and the woman director, Navy Admiral from Philadelphia, who has been very entrenched into getting a better understanding of military sexual trauma and the impact that it has on our lives. That was the one venue. Another venue were the listening sessions, which detail some of the understandings on the various components of, the transitioning issues in the VISN component, and the Women Veterans Advisory Committee conference, which was held in this past week here, April, was very enlightening. And the final event held in Philadelphia, the Military Sexual Trauma Forum at the Philadelphia VA, was very informative because the definitions and some of the information was very new to me on this platform, and one being that women veterans were now committing suicide in a manner that I'm not sure how it's distinguished, that it's from suicide, sexual assault related, when there are so many compounded issues that we are experiencing after many delays and challenges to get support. So I'm not sure if military sexual trauma has been a cause, a direct factor, but I'm sure as the research and investigations go on, there'll be more specific data as to state how military sexual trauma has been determined to be a root cause of suicide. And I'm sure that that would be a very interesting research agenda with the many platforms that are addressing military sexual trauma today. So if we are halfway through our program, I just want to add in a little bit of a discussion to where we have been discussing the conversation with some very astute military officers and those who have been very involved in advocacy over the years that's not a part of the mainstream conversations we see it. I do believe that the conversations are omitting some very, very important voices across the table for articulating on some very important information that would be valuable for the secretary to hear. One of them being, I'm just going to quote this, I will reserve the author of this for their privacy. But it says, MST survivors are established and controlled through and by networks of abusers who traumatize and repeatedly re-traumatize survivors. Abuses that are systematic and intentionally objectifications, threats, intimidations, retaliations, and re-abuses known as neuro-linguistic programming. NLP is used to control, coerce, force, and manipulate survivors by networks of multiracial, multigender, multigenerational, multicultural, multireligious, and international systems of abusers. That's a very interesting perspective, however, lends to the discussion for what I know to be very important. One of the challenges I hear in the military justice improvement and prevention legislation is the absence of the military comprehension of the present policy and the present laws and existing protocols that are in place. Despite the various changing and the modified manner by which they are procedurally dealt with, the realistic approach to military sexual trauma is very much a reality within the ranks. I think the Gideon case does not present the realities of reporting in that she reported to her mother. That is a different type of reporting than military reporting. Despite the fact that the perceived incident, which cannot be proven at this time because there was never any hearing or evidence provided on that, but the conversation that she may have interpreted And this is not victim blaming. This is the reality of what happens in the race. And I know that to be a fact because I am a victim, and I, too, reported a case of sexual assault, and my case was founded while I served on active duty. And there are different distinctions, but the rules are what they are. And those rules are in place to protect both victim and perpetrator. And Vanessa Guillen's case doesn't present that transparency for holding the kind of accountability with legislators as it would on the same level as within the military, an environment and different processes by which things are governed. And it is my understanding from communicating with media during the investigation that the leaking of this information by one of the lawyers involved in the Vanessa Guillen case presented and compromised the investigation and the outcome. Therefore, it tends to invalidate what the information would be had it not been leaked prematurely. So I'm just saying that Vanessa Guillen case in and of itself is not unique for what has occurred, but the inference that the case is uniquely a poster case for military sexual trauma, it does not lend to that. And I know that because I'm very much aware of many investigations. And to investigate a case outside of the military, as this one with the individual independent review council that was established to investigate that case, presented various missteps, omitted the military understanding language and protocols to validate the military authority in that and how it's dismissed. So it blames a component that had no input into that discussion. So I do believe that the recommendations that are being put forth before the Secretary of Defense will determine what those realities should be for being considered as what will be the proper prosecutorial position of the United States military in any case, which I don't believe that military sexual trauma alone is the greatest offense that's happening on these military posts, particularly Fort Hood. There are reports of crimes that are as egregious and nefarious on military posts than military sexual trauma. So I think there should be an equal approach to crimes as in comparison to military sexual trauma, but all crimes should be looked at and how they're dealt with as opposed to military sexual trauma, because it is that enmeshed type of cover-up type activity that presents the threat to the veterans and the victims who are all involved there. So I do know that the interpretations must reflect that in the articulation when they are used by military officers who would represent on military culture and protocols cannot defend any actions from a civilian perspective without interjecting the law, which is already in place because, number one, the oath of office separates civilians from military service. And it is a disservice to our country to present a civilian perspective on sexual assault in the military and have it interpreted through a civilian, I'm going to say officer, who does not understand how significant it is to also utilize a language that demonstrates an understanding of the military culture and the environment that it is in as a professional, constitutional space of the military, but the purpose as well, which is to defend and protect the country. And when there are demonstrations and protests on military installations, it is a violation of the UCMJ. There can be no protests or demonstrations of any kind, political or otherwise. So when legislators are demanding that generals are removed from office who have been highly trained to protect and defend our country, I consider that a compromise to our national security. And more importantly, that when the victim has made that charge against a military service person, that investigation must not distract from the mission of our military platform from any enemy, foreign or domestic. Our soldiers are trained to be deployment ready. You cannot be deployment ready if you are focused on lawsuits and paybacks to people who have wronged you or in criminal activity. I believe that decision and the recommendation by the Secretary will have a clear focus on what priorities must be in place in these cases. I will be presenting a report from my network of collaborators on this matter. We have been meeting for the past few months. I received a letter from the Secretary of Defense, the Office of the Pentagon, in January, prior to the announcement that this would go forward. I am an advocate. I created the very first platform from a grassroots perspective, and my name was somehow put into the hat to receive this email, and I got it, and I'm going to respond to it. I work very diligently with survivors and advocates, and we have not been invited to this table where these laws are being passed. And we must be all-inclusive. There are many dichotomies to the conversation of military sexual trauma. There are many layers, there are many tiers, there are many perspectives, and there are many experiences. But on this other side of that, in the military, once the oath of office is taken, that oath of service cannot be ignored, but neither can an individual who serves who would suggest that they do not know the role in the military or what they're supposed to do or how they're supposed to act when the rules are there to be followed. And I'm not suggesting that all accused are guilty or all accusers are innocent, because I have witnessed both in my lifetime. But the significance of investigations and proper protocols and procedures be followed is important as to not distract from the overall mission of the military. So who do we remove? Do you remove the officers who are trained to lead, or the victim is using a platform because of their interpretation or because of an incident that she has been wrong or he has been wrong? Are they going to fight for their rights and justice, or they're going to fight for their country? And I think that the position of the United States government, our Department of Defense, and the Secretary of Defense will determine what that priority is. Will it be the mission to serve the country and fight in the capacity by which you have made the oath, or will the energy and resources be exhausted to fight for justice on crimes and behaviors of individuals? Who will they remove? And it's going to be significant for what type of an environment can be created with a victim in position who refuses to follow the law, but goes public on their smartphone, puts up videos which compromises investigations, despite the fact that a court-martial may have rendered a particular result. There are appeals. There are various levels and protocols that must be followed. Congressional, the Senate, there are protocols that a soldier must maintain their demeanor. These demonstrations, protests, anger, threats to burn down military posts, threats to kill officers should not be tolerated at any level by anyone. Despite what has happened, they should be removed, as was I at some point. I was removed from my place of employment when I was serving on active duty in Fort Myer case with the Pentagon 15-6. There must be some order in how things are done. And I think that will be determined with General Austin, who has a very serious approach to managing the operations without being bullied or demanded into any expedited response, but a careful review of all in the DNA of our military and the culture. So do we do away with or eradicate sexual assault? I say we will not. We will not do away or eradicate sexual assault until all the truths are on the table. And the truths being there are behaviors and human nature and human development, fraternization, adultery, all types of interactions amongst human beings, male and female, officers and non-officers alike, that are surreptitiously hidden into these discussions. And until the story to hear also the perpetrator or the accused. And those stories oftentimes differ vastly. And oftentimes, when the accused is saying that they are silenced, it's because they have been compromised in some way. And I think that those conversations will be key for Secretary Austin. I am certain that the recommendations will all be heard. And I am honored that we have the type of intelligence, the type of mature military officer in General Austin, that he has not taken lightly and responded to any of these threats, as I have seen by Congress people who have disrespected 3- and 4-star general officers in general across these legislative platforms, though they have authority over our military-trained officers on military affairs, and I think that is in question. And I do believe that in the future, we will see a different level of transparency that is guided by military, not by legislators. I do believe that there will be a change in the protocols, but I also do believe there will be a different level of accountability, not only for the accused, but by the accuser. When you point your finger, and this is not victim blaming, and these cliches and short terms are not realistic in the military. There are real regulations. There are codes of regulations, there's the UCMJ and various laws that are already in place. Whether you're reforming old policy or whatever the case, it does not supersede what is in place right now. And the powering position that the military victims or those potential victims are placed in, that they have powers to demand and to confront their military officers disrespectfully, I think that would be a part of this conversation. Despite the fact that a victim may have a perspective or have been denied the opportunity to go to direct to their supervisor, there are always manners by which to communicate. If the smartphone can be used to do a PSA crying about a court-martial, not about the incident, which are two different things. We have victims who are extremely angry about the consequence of their perpetrator, but their position after the rape, for me, is if you have been raped, how do you get the strength to go after the perpetrator before you have even healed? How do you get the strength to muster up fighting the government if you've not even healed? I think healing should be a priority for these victims. And I'm going to conclude on this session because I really want to make it short. Add some of my perspective. This is what we're going to be tackling for our report. We're going to be talking about accountability on all sides, the accuser and the perpetrators and our military NCOs and officers who can be held accountable when they do not do their jobs. But certainly the accuser and the perpetrators, when these people are named in reports and claims of sexual assault and related types of activity, they have an accountability as well. And these types of things will be presented in our report, and we will maybe have one other discussion this week in our private meeting, and our report will go out before the end of the month when the Secretary is expected to review his recommendations. And I thank you all for listening. This is Cassie Santos, Women Veterans Speak. Please know that we are very serious about ending this. We are all victims, and we all want justice. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.